Things take a left turn on this podcast when Charlie Kirk introduces the idea of abortion.
If you knew for certain the baby, would you agree it's a baby? Is that a good term to use if it's in a womb? Is that a baby?
I think most people would say fetus.
Probably fetus. Yeah.
Okay, so what does fetus mean in Latin?
I think a fetus is a growing child. It's a
Yeah,
developing
you're right,
child.
Molly. You know, it means a little human.
Yeah.
It's just using fetus is nothing more than a cope for what you know it is. It's a baby, right? So it's just
Obviously not if we're here debating it. I don't think.
So that's the number one tactic used in the psychological war involving abortion. The first thing they will try to do is disassociate what exactly is growing inside of a woman. So we understand that biologically, a baby growing inside of a woman is a separate biological entity. So in order to disassociate the biological connection with the life that is growing within a womb, what they'll tell you is it is a fetus because it dehumanizes the separate biological entity that's growing inside of a woman. Now, if you were to refer to it as a baby or your son or your daughter, immediately that emotional connection immediately begins. And the last thing that they want to do is allow you to have an emotional connection because they understand that your chances of keeping that child now increases by over 50%. But let's go ahead and continue.
It's as settled
then
as
what?
think
You don't
it
have to
is.
use the word fetus. It just makes people feel better. It's obviously a baby.
No, I mean, obviously you wouldn't take a fetus that just has like a heart and like their brain isn't fully formed and be like, that's the same as like a 1 month old.
Yeah.
Like we obviously see differences between development
Okay.
from then and there.
So, but then how about 30 weeks?
That's where it becomes a lot more contentious. But the point being is that we don't look at a fetus from its beginning stages and be like, yeah, that's the same thing as my like 3-month-old cousin.
Hold on. That's a 9-month-old is not the same thing as a 1-month-old.
Okay, and
right? So you can go through the progression of development continues. The question is, when does it start?
Yeah, that's $1 million question. I agree with that.
So
Do you think conception?
Of course, that's the only answer.
Most women, I don't believe, even know that they're pregnant before 6 weeks.
But-
So like around like the heartbeats
Yeah,
and
but
stuff like that.
the knowledge of your
Trying to argue that the life has more value based on the stage within the life cycle is absolutely nonsensical. And this is the kind of tactics you'll start to see when it comes to the abortion debate, is because they understand that, number one, life begins at conception. They understand that biologically it is a separate entity that is growing inside the womb of the mother. So now they're trying to sidestep it and they're trying to make arguments as, well, what about if it's first term or second term versus 1 month or 9 month? Yeah, guys, like at the end of the day, is it life or not? That's the first question. An abortion terminates said life. You can continue to call it fetus because you don't want to admit in your heart that it is the human being, but the reality is that is what you're terminating. This is how messy this whole argument gets when we try to argue at what stage is it legitimately a life and it's more valuable. This is why it was over 10 years ago for the first time I heard the arguments for post-birth abortion. I thought it was the most insane thing I've ever heard. This was probably around like 2011. It was 2 neurosurgeons from Australia, and they were making the argument that we should have post-birth abortions. And their argument was, as the philosophical quote from Descartes goes, I think, therefore I am. They made the argument that an infant cannot prove that it exists, therefore it is not life. And I still think about that till this day, and I remember how nonsensical I thought it was. I was like, this is absolutely insanity. The fact that within the space of academia, we have people making this kind of argument. Now, about over a decade later, it seems more and more realistic as time goes on. Like, people want abortions up until term, full term. People will literally argue that. Not everyone, but there are people that argue for full-term abortions. Now, what's the difference between a full-term abortion and then the day after when it's actually born? But let's go ahead and continue here.
pregnancy doesn't mean that you're not pregnant.
No. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying, like, practicality-wise, there are many instances of women who have miscarriages without even ever knowing, because it might just present as like a very heavy cycle that month.
That's fine, but it doesn't make it any less a life,
So
right?
I
Sure,
have
go ahead, Molly.
No, but do you mourn that miscarriage in the same
Of
way you
course,
mourn like
100%,
an
yes.
abortion, like a conscious
Not the same way.
choice?
No, it's not the same way. No, but it's still a tragedy. A miscarriage is a tragedy, but
So
an
do you-
abortion.
Even if she doesn't
So-
know about it?
But an abortion is an act of human will. a miscarriage most times is not. Now, sometimes it can be a miscarriage because you drank alcohol and you didn't know you were pregnant, or you might have taken a drug that have side effects. But yes, a miscarriage is a tragedy, yes.
I have a question. So do you care about the children once they're born?
I mean, I care a lot about them, yeah.
So if say a woman got R-worded or something, or even if she just got pregnant and
Grid One
wanna
Motorsports
keep
donated $200.
Right?
The one thing that frustrates me about the Whatever podcast, they suck at running a smooth podcast. And this talk to text feature is so annoying. But let's go ahead and just attack the argument that she's making here. Now, this is an argument for the quality of life. So you'll hear this a lot with those who are pro-choice. They'll say, well, do you even care about the life of the child after it's born? Or the child's going to live in subpar conditions. They're going to belong to a lower tiered socioeconomic status, family. They may not be loved. What if they're abused? And this is the kind of argument you hear. And first and foremost, who made you God? You're not God to say that because you're born in a lower tier socioeconomic family, that therefore your life and the status of your life is of less value. There are a lot of great men and women who come from harder conditions, poor families, single mother, single father. Maybe it was in the projects. Maybe you were immigrant from a third world country. None of those things have a bearing on whether or not your life is of value. Those are non-arguments. Now, to say everybody has to begin life on the same level, that's fantasy. That's never happened in the history of the world. You'll never be able to find an example of that happening at any point in history. Like, that's fantasy. So to say that is our standard is absolutely absurd, because nobody will be able to fit that standard. What if they meet the income aspect, but one family member is uneducated? What if one family member has a doctorate degree, but they're a single parent? Are we going to disqualify everybody from being born because they don't have the ideal launching pad?
Is not subjective, and we know this because you were speaking of killing. Why is it so easy for you ladies to kill kids? If your comfort
What a
and
good faith
lifestyle
question.
more important than a life you created?
anyway, my question was, what was I saying? Oh, if
You were saying
so
if somebody
someone got,
someone
like,
forced
R-worded,
sex upon themselves, it's the word you're,
or even like not even just that, but say like if the mother like was homeless or something, say like she didn't have a good life, do you still think that child deserves to be brought into the world just to suffer?
Well, so it's not a guarantee of suffering, number one. One sec. The answer is yes, the life should be brought into the world. There are twice as many people on the adoption waiting list.
There's so many people.
Well, let me ask you guys, and I'm just curious, how many abortions do you think there are a year in America?
I have no
Tens
idea.
of thousands, I assume.
Any other guesses?
I have no clue.
What if I told you there was over 1 million abortions every year?
That wouldn't surprise me at all.
But you went from tens of thousands to 1 million.
I mean, there's billions of people on the
No.
on the
Yeah, there's
so-
340 million in America. That's right. No, but do you think
As far as like reported ones, because even
that
just
doesn't
reporting
count-
data is going to be incomplete
that
because
doesn't count mifepristone, which is the chemical abortion that people get
Right.
at home. It doesn't count Plan B, right? So,
and even if like abortion were illegal, for example, we stopped gathering data on like who procures abortions, there would be so many. There's so many now, even
Well,
with
not
states
true.
where it's still legal.
Texas, it's gone down
Even-
dramatically. So hundreds of
No,
thousands.
they're still happening. It's
Well,
just
no, they're happening,
not
but
being accounted
about
for.
90%
Women are
abortion.
just doing it to themselves.
Right, it's a 90% abortion reduction rate in Texas. I don't want to dwell on that too much, though. So there's 1 million abortions every single year, and there's twice as many people on the there's 2 million people actively on the adoption waiting list. So there's really no such thing currently, there could be, but currently, of an unwanted child. So there's 2 million people wanting to adopt, and there's 1 million people that have abortions every single year. So there's twice as many people that want to get a child. Now, there's a longer conversation about making it less bureaucratic without allowing bad people to adopt kids for bad reasons. I'm perfectly open for that conversation. But to answer your question, I don't love the premise. It's a really good question because a lot of people have it. I don't necessarily believe being born in poverty is a death sentence or is a reason to
of
terminate.
course not.
No, but abortion is a death sentence. So I don't think.
Shout out to Charlie Kirk for just remaining poised throughout this conversation, this panel. Obviously, it's littered with very liberal women who are all, for the most part, majority pro-choice. They are in favor of termination of life. Now, with that being said, I just think this is just This conversation stood out to me because I think it's just a glimpse into our culture. If people are not aware of how our culture views the whole abortion topic, this is just a small sample size, but I believe it's emblematic of a lot of what we're seeing for Gen Z, and it's probably going to amplify by the time we get to Gen Alpha. At the end of the day, the devil is very strategic in what he does, and he's moved the battlefield into the womb of women. Now, the womb was originally meant to be the safest place for a child to grow and develop inside of the mother. And unfortunately, the devil has brought the battlefield right there. Charlie Kirk just highlighted the numbers. We're seeing about 1 million abortions per year. And to say that a life of suffering is possible reason for abortion, or to say that maybe my standard of living is not where I want to be, or I want to just get to a better position in life, or I just want to get a promotion, make more money, I just want to move out the city. Those are all not valid reasons for abortion, because there are 2 million people looking, or 2 million families looking to adopt in our country right now. So there's more than twice the amount available to adopt. With that being said, I just wanted to share this video and share my 2 cents on it, but you guys let me know your thoughts on it in the comments. Shout out to Charlie Kirk. He's doing a good job out there in Arizona. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Deuces.